Exhortation to the Heathen by Clement of Alexandria. Let us then run over, if you choose, the opinions of the philosophers, to which they give boastful utterance respecting the gods, that we may discover philosophy itself through its conceit, making an idol of matter. Although we are able to show as we proceed that even while deifying certain demons, it has a dream of the truth. The elements were designated as the first principles of all things by some of them, by Thales of Miletus, who celebrated water, and Anaximenes, also of Miletus, who celebrated air as the first principle of all things, and was followed afterwards by Diogenes of Apollonia. Parmenides of Elia introduced fire and earth as gods, one of which, namely fire, Hippasus of Metapontum and Heraclitus of Ephesus supposed a divinity. Empedocles of Agrigento fell in with a multitude, and in addition to those four elements enumerates disagreement and agreement. Atheists, surely these are to be reckoned, who through an unwise wisdom worshipped matter, who did not indeed pay religious honor to stocks and stones, but deified earth, the mother of these, who did not make an image of Poseidon, but revered water itself. For what else, according to the original signification, is Poseidon but a moist substance, the name being derived from posis, drink, as beyond doubt the warlike Ares is so called from arsis, rising up, and anorisis, destroying. For this reason mainly I think many fix a sword into the ground and sacrifice to it as to Ares. The Scythians have a practice of this nature, as Eudoxus tells us in the second book of his travels. The Sauromate, too, a tribe of the Scythians, worship a saber, as Echesius says in his work on mysteries. This was also the case with Heraclitus and his followers, who worshipped fire as the first cause, for this fire others named Hephaestus. The Persian Magi, too, and many of the inhabitants of Asia worshipped fire, and besides them the Macedonians, as Diogenes relates in the first book of his Persica. Why specify the Sauromate, who are said by Nymphodorus in his barbaric customs to pay sacred honors to fire, or the Persians, or the Medes, or the Magi? These, Dino tells us, sacrifice beneath the open sky, regarding fire and water as the only images of the gods. Nor have I failed to reveal their ignorance, for however much they think to keep clear of error in one form, they slide into it in another. They have not supposed stocks and stones to be images of the gods, like the Greeks, nor ibises and ichneumons like the Egyptians, but fire and water as philosophers. Berosus, in the third book of his Chaldaics, shows that it was after many successive periods of years that men worshipped images of human shape, this practice being introduced by Artaxerxes, the son of Darius and father of Ochus, who first set up the image of Aphrodite Anaitis at Babylon and Susa, and Ecbatana set the example of worshipping it to the Persians, the Bactrians to Damascus and Sardis. Let the philosophers, then, own as their teachers the Persians, or the Sauromate, or the Magi, from whom they have learned the impious doctrine of regarding as divine certain first principles, being ignorant of the great first cause, the maker of all things, and creator of those very first principles, the unbegotten God, but reverencing these weak and beggarly elements, as the Apostle says, which were made for the service of man. And of the rest of the philosophers who, passing over the elements, have eagerly sought after something higher and nobler, some have descanted on the infinite, of whom were Anaximander of Miletus, Anaxagoras of Clazomene, and the Athenian Archelaus, both of whom set mind, nous, above infinity, while the Milesian Leucippus and the Chian Metrodorus apparently inculcated two first principles, fullness and vacuity. Democritus of Abdera, while accepting these two, added to them images Etheler, while Alcmaeon of Crotona supposed the stars to be gods, and endowed with life. I will not keep silence as to their effrontery. Xenocrates of Chalcedon indicates that the planets are 7 gods, and that the universe, composed of all these, is an 8th. Nor will I pass over those of the porch who say that the divinity pervades all matter, even the vilest, and thus clumsily disgrace philosophy. Nor do I think will it be taken ill, having reached this point, to advert to the peripatetics. The father of this sect, not knowing the Father of all things, thinks that he who is called the highest is the soul of the universe. That is, he supposes the soul of the world to be God, and so is pierced by his own sword. For by first limiting the sphere of providence to the orbit of the moon, and then by supposing the universe to be God, he confutes himself, inasmuch as he teaches that that which is without God is God, and that Eresian Theophrastus, the pupil of Aristotle, conjectures at one time heaven and at another spirit to be God. Epicurus alone I shall gladly forget, who carries impiety to its full length, and thinks that God takes no charge of the world. What moreover of Heraclides of Pontus? He is dragged everywhere to the images, the idola of Democritus. Chapter 6. A great crowd of this description rushes on my mind, introducing, as it were, a terrifying apparition of strange demons, speaking of fabulous and monstrous shapes in old wives' talk. Far from enjoining men to listen to such tales are we, who avoid the practice of soothing our crying children, as the saying is, by telling them fabulous stories, being afraid of fostering in their minds the impiety professed by those who, though wise in their own conceit, have no more knowledge of the truth than infants. For why, in the name of truth, do you make those who believe you subject to ruin and corruption, dire and irretrievable? Why, I beseech you, fill up life with idolatrous images by feigning the winds, or the air, or fire, or earth, or stones, or stocks, or steel, or this universe to be gods? And prating loftily of the heavenly bodies in this much vaunted science of astrology, not astronomy, to those men who have truly wandered talk of the wandering stars as gods. It is the Lord of the spirits, the Lord of the fire, the maker of the universe, him who lighted up the sun, that I long for. I seek after God, not the works of God. Whom shall I take as a helper in my inquiry? We do not, if you have no objection, wholly disown Plato. How, then, is God to be searched out, O Plato? For both to find the Father and Maker of this universe is a work of difficulty, and having found him, to declare him fully is impossible. Why so? By himself, I beseech you, for he can by no means be expressed. Well done, Plato. You have touched on the truth. But do not flag. Undertake with me the inquiry respecting the good. For into all men whatever, especially those who are occupied with intellectual pursuits, a certain divine effluence has been instilled. Wherefore, though reluctantly, they confess that God is one, indestructible, unbegotten, and that somewhere above in the tracts of heaven, in his own peculiar appropriate eminence, whence he surveys all things, he has an existence true and eternal. Tell me what I am to conceive God to be, who sees all things, and is himself unseen, Euripides says. Accordingly, Menander seems to me to have fallen into error when he said, O Son, for you, first of gods, ought to be worshipped, by whom it is that we are able to see the other gods. For the Son never could show me the true God, but that healthful word, that is the Son of the soul, by whom alone, when he arises in the depths of the soul, the eye of the soul itself is irradiated. Whence, accordingly, Democritus, not without reason, says that a few of the men of intellect, raising their hands upwards to what we Greeks now call the air, called the whole expanse Zeus, or God. He too knows all things, gives and takes away, and he is king of all. Of the same sentiments is Plato, who somewhere alludes to God thus, around the king of all are all things, and he is the cause of all good things. Who then is the king of all? God, who is the measure of the truth of all existence. As then the things that are to be measured are contained in the measure, so also the knowledge of God measures and comprehends truth. And the truly holy Moses says, There shall not be in your bag a balance and a balance great or small, but a true and just balance shall be to you, deeming the balance and measure and number of the whole to be God. For the unjust and unrighteous idols are hid at home in the bag, and so to speak in the polluted soul. But the only just measure is the only true God, always just, continuing the self-same, who measures all things and weighs them by righteousness as in a balance, grasping and sustaining universal nature in equilibrium. God, therefore, as the old saying has it, occupying the beginning, the middle, and the end of all that is in being, keeps the straight course, while he makes the circuit of nature, and justice always follows him, avenging those who violate the divine law. Whence, O Plato, is that hint of the truth which you give? Whence this rich copiousness of diction, which proclaims piety with oracular utterance? The tribes of the barbarians, he says, are wiser than these. I know your teachers, even if you would conceal them. You have learned geometry from the Egyptians, astronomy from the Babylonians. The charms of healing you have got from the Thracians. The Assyrians also have taught you many things, but for the laws that are consistent with truth and your sentiments respecting God, you are indebted to the Hebrews, who do not worship through vain deceits the works of men, of gold and brass and silver and ivory, and images of dead men, of wood and stone, which other men, led by their foolish inclinations, worship, but raise to heaven pure alms, when they rise from bed, purifying themselves with water, and worship alone the Eternal, who reigns forevermore. And let it not be this one man alone, Plato, but, O philosophy, hasten to produce many others also, who declare the only true God to be God, through his inspiration, if in any measure they have grasped the truth. For Antisthenes did not think out this doctrine of the Cynics, but it is in virtue of his being a disciple of Socrates that he says that God is not like to any, wherefore no one can know him from an image. And Xenophon the Athenian would have in his own person committed freely to writing somewhat of the truth, and given the same testimony as Socrates, had he not been afraid of the cup of poison which Socrates had to drink. But he hints nothing less. He says, "How great and powerful he is who moves all things and is himself at rest is manifest, but what he is in form is not revealed." The sun himself, intended to be the source of light to all around, does not deem it fitting to allow himself to be looked at, but if anyone audaciously gazes on him, he is deprived of sight. Whence, then, does the son of Gryllus learn his wisdom? Is it not manifestly from the prophetess of the Hebrews, who prophesies in the following style? What flesh can see with the eye the celestial, the true, the immortal God, who inhabits the vault of heaven? Nay, men born mortal cannot even stand before the rays of the sun. Cleanthes Pisadeus, the Stoic philosopher, who exhibits not a poetic theogony, but a true theology, has not concealed what sentiments he entertained respecting God. If you ask me what is the nature of the good, listen, that which is regular, just, holy, pious, self-governing, useful, fair, fitting, grave, independent, always beneficial, that feels no fear or grief, profitable, painless, helpful, pleasant, safe, friendly, held in esteem, agreeing with itself, honorable, humble, careful, meek, zealous, perennial, blameless, everlasting. Mean is everyone who looks to opinion with the view of obtaining some advantage from it. Here, as I think, he clearly teaches of what nature God is, and that the common opinion and religious customs enslave those that follow them, but seek not after God. We must not either keep the Pythagoreans in the background who say, God is one, and he is not, as some suppose, outside of this frame of things, but within it, but in all the entirety of his being, is in the whole circle of existence, surveying all nature, and blending in harmonious union the whole, the author of all his own forces and works, the giver of light in heaven, and father of all, the mind and vital power of the whole world, the mover of all things. For the knowledge of God, these utterances, written by those we have mentioned through the inspiration of God and selected by us, may suffice even for the man that has but small power to examine into truth.